And now we present to you Thac0 with Advantage.
Welcome to Thac0 with Advantage. We're two friends that have been playing D&D a long time. While we both love lots of other RPGs, D&D knows where we buried the bodies. Hi, I'm Ange, and I've been gaming for over 3 decades. Started with 1st edition and haven't stopped yet. I've been writing for Gnome Stew for a decade now, little over a decade now, and I run the Gnomecast, the Gnome Stew's podcast.
I'm Jared. We're all good here. How are you? There are indeed articles on Gnome Stew and whatdoiknowjr.com with reviews and opinion pieces about D&D and other RPGs that I have written if you would like to check those out. After we look at the games we're running in the campaign journal, we'll be talking about a variety of times when things haven't gone quite as expected during a game. Then we'll have some recommendations of D&D related content for you to check out in our downtime research segment.
Now stand by for station identification. This is WDND the Role Player. Now we're going to McElroy McKinney and the Bardic College.
Sage Advice was a column in Dragon magazine that first appeared in issue number 31 in 1979, with the first author being Gene Wells. TSR hired Gene Wells as an editor in 1978. After editing adventures like White Plume Mountain, they gave her the job of officially clarifying rules, a task she enjoyed because she wanted the game to be accessible to new, younger gamers. One of the best rules clarifications she made was probably in response to a query about the damage caused by a bow. She clarified that the bow itself doesn't cause damage, but the arrow inflicts 1d6 damage. And then she outlined the damage that would result from hitting someone with the bow and explained what would happen to the bow. Now, I don't really have much else to say. I'm just going to sit here quietly and listen to heads explode at the notion that a woman was the first sage of Sage Advice, the go-to column for decades to determine if you were doing D&D right.
Let me just finish up this campaign journal.
Okay, since we last talked, I have gotten to play twice and run once. One of those times playing was Jared's game, so I'm going to let him talk about that, but the other was at a small private gaming con that I got to attend. Now, if you've been around for any length of time, you've heard me say that I do not play D&D at cons. We have D&D at home. This was an exception, though. It was a private con of about 30-ish people. I knew everyone there, and it was a friend who had put a D&D game on the schedule. And I already like his games a lot. I've played a bunch of his campaigns and will play anything he wants to run. So, oh, yeah, sure, I'll play his D&D game. The session was titled Echoes of the Shadow Spire, and it was a 5e game using a setting book called Brutal Races. Essentially, you're playing the normally evil humanoid races, and the normally good ones are the bad guys. I mean, it's a setting that could very easily trend towards obnoxiously evil, as we were essentially a horde invading the Wood Elven lands. But there was also history there of how the Wood Elves had tried to wipe out our people in the past, and, you know, it was... Yes, we were playing the quote-unquote evil ones, but it wasn't quite meant to be like you're just evil and gonna go stomp on babies. Our party consisted of an orc fighter, a hobgoblin barbarian, a goblin rogue, a lizard folk ancestral shaman, which was it was a special class for that setting book, and a kobold sorcerer, which I was playing. I really enjoyed the Kobold Sorcerer. She was a ton of fun. She was the smallest in the party, but probably had the biggest chip on her shoulder, as she regularly told everyone that she had the blood of dragons in her veins. She also had a thing for setting stuff on fire. There was a lot of, I have the blood of dragons in me! All of that. It was just a lot of fun. By the end of it, everyone was going, yes, we know you have the blood of dragons in you. So while there was some fighting with the remnants of the Wood Elves in the area we were going through, the session was actually more of a dungeon crawl as we were exploring this ancient spire to try and set it up as a forward base for our horde. It turned out to be haunted, and so it was our job to clear it, getting rid of the powerful entity that was there, setting it up as our stronghold, so on and so forth. It was a lot of fun. It was a good group of players. It was a really good GM. I had fun putting on my kobold energy. Probably not something I'd want to do as a campaign unless it was exactly the right group of players and GM. But for that one shot, it was a ton of fun. I do believe the GM is going to be running that at Origins, if you are interested in giving it a shot. It's Echoes of the Shadowspire. For the old Margrave game, I ran the Bramble King adventure out of the new book, which is new to that book. I guess it had been published before in another location, but was added to the old Margrave, replacing some other adventures in the previous book that didn't quite work as well. In fact, I talked quite a bit with Jared about whether or not to do any of the Durende adventures, because I'm just like, I don't get this. I don't like it. This is short. This is stupid.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. It is not developed enough to really make it as compelling as it could be.
Yeah. I am still probably going to take one of those adventures and slot them in at a slightly future point, because I spent a lot of time making a map. So we'll use that. But no, I like the Bramble King a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
But it meant I had to do a bit more work because there was nothing prepared for it in Shard, because Shard only has Tales of the Old Margrave, not the Old Margrave, which is the new book. Normally, this group is really, really careful and really procedural about the way they approach things. The way the main meat of this adventure was set up was lots of little tiny encounters that they could have throughout this old structure. And I'm like, oh God, they're going to walk right through these. I need to beef them up a little bit so they're at least a little bit challenging. I did not expect them to completely rush headlong into this location and alert everything that they were there. So it went from being like one little small creature here, one little small creature here, to all of the creatures converging on them at once. They triggered all of the fights at once.
Mm-hmm.
There's a guard at the entrance that was actually only supposed to be there if they were loud and didn't sneak up. There were several steam mephits and a couple of Children of Briar in the area off the main hallway. There were a couple of more Children of Briar around the corner with some bramble beasts. There was an ooze hidden in a well. There were shadows down a small corridor. There was an awakened tree in a hidden area. And they literally triggered it all at once. I was able to justify the shadows staying out of it because they kind of had their own mission that they were trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and if you're already piling on people, shadows are the things that are going to TPK them.
Yeah. Yeah. And there were also some other Children of Briar that it said were up in a higher level location that were arguing amongst themselves, so I could justify them not coming down and dealing with whatever the heck this was. But that was still 3 bramble beasts, 4 Children of the Briar, 3 steam mephits, 1 awakened tree, which actually wasn't going to be fighting. It was more just there to guard a thing. In fact, it felt really bad that it basically took out the ranger in one hit.
Gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah, and like, if they had dealt with everything quickly enough, they wouldn't have had to have dealt with the ooze, but the Children of the Briar basically ran over and released it because
Oh goodness.
And this is, mind you, this is me trimming them back as I'm taking out the stuff I added, because there was going to be more shadows, there was going to be more Children of the Briar, more steam mephits, because like that's what they could normally handle in a single fight. I didn't expect them to do what they did.
We would like this to be one scene and one combat.
And that's what it was. In fact, we did not even pause between them entering the location and getting up to the upper level where the last Children of the Briar were. As a result, we played from about 7 p.m. to 12:30 at night. I had one player tap out because she does not do late nights. And about midnight, she's like, I'm done, guys. I'm done. I'll see you next time. But we were so close to finishing that it was like, okay, we finished the fight and called it there, and we'll deal with cleanup when we next play. And while it may seem like I'm complaining about them rushing in, it was still a really fun session. And I had an absolute blast playing the Children of Briar. They're tiny creatures made out of brambles and thorns, and they're absolute little bastards. So I got to curse like as hell as I played them like this.
That's what I was disappointed in with all the Twig Blights and Curse of Straw, because Twig Blights don't have much of a personality because they don't talk.
honestly, I don't even know if the children of Briar are supposed to talk, but it seemed appropriate and it was fun to give them a voice. I also made the awakened tree talk because I don't know if they're supposed to be able to talk, but as Dahlia is laying there on the ground beside the tree, starting to fail death saves, and everyone else is running out to deal with everything else, the tree's like, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. And I said it dropped a single drop of sap onto Dahlia, which healed her for 1 hit point. Because I'm like...
What's funny is I have been in many groups where a person triggers the chain encounters. I don't know that I've been in too many where the entire group just decides to chain them together.
Honestly... And I know at least one of my players listens to this, so take this with a grain of salt, player. Like how I talked about when I was in Scott's Dungeon of the Mad Mage, and I would just kind of hang back and let them make decisions. I think my players that would have normally cautioned everyone to, like, let's approach this more carefully, are doing the take a slight back seat and just let it happen. See where it all falls.
This has actually been interesting because we had a lot of similar experiences when you started running the old Margrave stuff, but now you're getting into the stuff that deviates. So I'm really curious to see how that goes.
I mean, the next thing I'll be getting into is you've run it before,
yes,
so we'll be back there. Although I am changing the next one slightly because I think I ranted to you in a PM that I didn't like the motivations the adventure set up for the players to get involved with this situation, because it's like, why? They wouldn't care. They wouldn't go in there and do this for those reasons. So I kind of had to change some stuff up, and I'm connecting it to the Bramble King to kind of flow into the next scene.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to have them go do this next thing before they get a chance to go back to Zobek and have more downtime.
In my case, I was lucky because I had a party with 3 bear folk in it who had the Bear King as their patron. So anything remotely related to honey, and I won't go further, is real easy to say, I need you to go do this.
Yeah.
So my game, after my frustration with Roll20 last session, I just went whole hog and started transferring stuff over to Shard. I wasn't going to force anyone to go, but I also wanted to have like my proof of concept there so that people could see it and what it looked like. Everybody seemed to be okay with switching to it, and I'm pretty happy with it. I imported a whole bunch of stuff, and we ran our first session there. I was pretty happy. I won't get too much into the mechanics of it, but part of it was the mechanics weren't biting me in the ass like they were with Roll20.
I mean, I was sitting very quietly in the corner, not trying to influence anyone else's decision, but I was like, yes, because Roll20 is fantastic for what it is. It is absolutely delightful to have a VTT out there that can do so many different game systems, but it's just clunky in certain ways that Shard does so much easier.
And that was the thing that I wanted to point out. Like, I am gnashing my teeth at Roll20 for some of the issues we had these last couple sessions, but I really don't have a big problem with Roll20. My biggest problem is D&D 5th edition has just enough stuff that when Roll20 does 2/3 of it fine, and the other third of it, it doesn't really do well, and some of it is similar stuff that it does over here, but not over here, that just messes with me.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fact that one magic item you can equip and it just does what it's supposed to do on the character sheet, and then the other magic item is just text telling you what the magic item does, that after a while, it gets hard for me to deal with that, because I'm like, okay, do I need to rebuild this so it works, so that it's like all the other magic items I handed out? Or do I just, say, well, you're just going to have to look that one up? I don't like that imbalance. It doesn't work well in my brain. Not entirely Roll20's fault, because there are approximately 12 trillion things that go into D&D 5e now.
Yeah. I mean, I will, like I said, I don't want to throw Roll20 under the bus, but to run D&D on Roll20, you have to have bought the content.
Yeah.
It's not easy to try and manually import it yourself. Unlike Shard, where you can manually import the stuff you own in other formats to use in the VTT, because it is only you and your players that will have access to it.
Yeah.
Shard's not perfect. There are things it has that don't quite work right, but I do think because it is a smaller platform with probably a smaller team working on it, they're pretty responsive.
Mm-hmm.
When you go to the Discord and ask about, problems, feature requests, all of that. I every now and then I will go in and ask for critical hits to be, max plus a roll, and they're like, it's on our list.
Yeah, I was going to say I would love for custom criticals on there. That's one of the things that I would like to see, but I get it. I mean, it's not something that Roll20 can necessarily do better, so it's not really a point against them. I really think a lot of it comes down to Shard is built to run 5e SRD games, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
It is not worrying about trying to run multiple systems. If it facilitates running a 5e SRD game, they can work on it and add it, and they don't have to worry about anything else.
Let's be clear here. Most of these VTTs, I won't say most, many of these VTTs are run by volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
Roll20 may have some paid people, Foundry may have some paid people, but stuff like Shard, various other things out there, this is all volunteers doing it because they love this hobby.
Or people that are part owners of the company and are essentially volunteering because they're part owners and not making a whole lot.
Yeah. This is a slight tangent, but there is a website out there. It's not a VTT, but there's a website out there called savage.us, which is a Savage Worlds character builder resource. Absolutely fantastic. Filled a niche that was broken when Pinnacle stopped working with Hero Labs.
Mm-hmm.
Because Hero Labs used to have all the Savage Worlds content, and now it doesn't. So Savage.us was like a boon to people to be able to build stuff for their games, for their characters, so on and so forth. The owner and developer passed away last year.
Ooh.
And, that kind of left the site in limbo. Thankfully, he had expressed in his last wishes, he had expressed that he wanted the site to continue. And basically his spouse had the ability to find somebody to step in and fill in the hole. So now the site is back up and running. And slowly, as they get most of the bugs and some of the bigger problems worked out, they'll start adding content again. But like I said, this is the thing that can happen in a hobby-driven business.
Mm-hmm. So we left off. The group was facing off against 6 Scorch Drakes, and I rebuilt that encounter in Shard. We ran with it as soon as we started. I actually think that these are the fights that I kind of like because I don't want to annihilate players, but I also don't want them to be a cakewalk. And by the end of the fight, Marin had been dropped to 0. The Bard's mammoth form had been dropped to 0 so that he lost his polymorph. Like, it didn't feel like it was a cakewalk. If you guys didn't necessarily have a super hard time with it, but you had to pay attention to what you were doing, a little bit.
It was hard enough that Marin's player got to make jokes about making a monk character to replace Marin.
I do love the fact that the Drakes apparently fought better when they were blinded, because I had a Scorch Drake get a critical on the Bard as a mammoth with disadvantage, meaning I rolled 2 20s.
Yep.
These are 12th level characters, so we are starting to see like big guns being pulled out because the Sorcerer dropped Kindness of Angels twice, which is a 6th level spell with a 20-foot radius that heals allies in the radius and then potentially damages, blinds, and knocks prone any enemies in that same area. And she did that twice. I think that encounter, I enjoyed it. I thought it went pretty well. It didn't feel like it was dragging on too long, but it did take a while to resolve.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like it ebbed and flowed. I like encounters like that.
It was our first time in that VTT space.
Mm-hmm.
And while the other players have played other games in Shard, this was the first time with these characters in Shard,
Mm-hmm.
figuring out where everything is, figuring out how to work the spells, because there's a bunch of little fiddly bits here and there that I think are good quality of life things. They just take a little bit of getting used to.
Yeah. I do think people were starting to appreciate the not having to ask whether something was bloodied, because it just happens as you're doing damage to it.
Oh, look, it has a yellow ring. That means it's at half hit points. Oh, look, it has a red ring. It's at quarter of its hit points.
Yeah, I like that that's automatic. But our group finally made it to Valera, which is the former capital of an elven empire before the elves retreated to the Summerlands. So there's a whole bunch of repurposed elven buildings and abandoned temples to elf gods, and the PCs did their cloak and dagger spy thing and gave their password to the person manning the shrine of the Saint of Mercenaries, and they got their secret meeting with the Sultana in exile of the Marodi Empire, and she made them drink a potion that will cause them to forget the last 2 years of their life if they say a certain phrase, so that they can't give up anything that's part of this conspiracy. And I liked that Kazina was more hesitant than anybody else when it came to that, because she has a very specific reason not to want to forget the last 2 years.
She got her sister back. She doesn't want to lose her sister again.
And, you know, it's something that you as a player would have to trigger, but it is something that is like there now. So, you know, if you do that, then you lose those 2 years.
I told Jared that as kind of an after game note that before we leave the city, Kazina is going to go find a tattoo artist and put a little tattoo on herself to remind herself that she did find a Nezek.
I like character bits like that. So the Sultana gave them 3 missions to start this long-term conspiracy. And the 3 missions were to find a dragon slaying spear made by the elves that were in the region before, find out what the Dread Sultan scholars are exploring, or to go recruit a mercenary company dedicated to Loki, which is the thing that our sorcerer who is descended from Baldur is a little nervous about going to do. But also the dragon slaying spear is really kind of a nasty thing, because those are heretical objects to even have in the Marodi Empire, because these kill the most exalted things that everybody agrees should be in charge of us. So it's kind of this is getting serious. This is almost like the nuclear option here.
We don't want to use it on any dragon. We want to use it on a dragon.
Yes. There is one specific dragon whose name might get painted into the side of that spear. So that's what we have going on. And tomorrow I will be running my Curse of Strahd game, so I will probably talk about that in our next episode.
Yes. I was supposed to be starting up playing in the City of Cowls game this weekend, but the GM had family stuff come up. So we're having to punt another 2 weeks down the road. So tomorrow we're going to do a one-shot of Monster of the Week instead. But I was like super excited to get back into that. And like, nope.
Welcome to the Dungeon Master's Workshop.
There's a saying that no plan survives contact with the enemy. Anyone who's been running RPGs for any length of time can easily attest to how no game prep completely survives contact with the players. Today, we're going to talk about various times that we've had things go awry in our games, from mistakes to players doing the unexpected, and how we handled them. How often do you find things going awry in a session?
Every damn game.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Really, we are all human beings, and I don't think I have ever had a session where I sat there and thought, everyone made a good decision. Every, mechanical thing went completely smooth. That session was the perfect session that we could record and show somebody, and they would know this is the pinnacle of everything you have ever worked for. I have not seen it. I have not seen... For all the people that desperately love Critical Role and Dimension 20, you have not seen that on either one of those shows either.
Yeah, there are definitely times when things just don't go the way you expected them to. And this can be good and this can be bad. Mm-hmm. Like I talked about the Tales of the Old Margrave game, and them basically blundering into the encounter, which I never expected because they've never done that before. Mm-hmm. They explained why they did it afterwards, and I was like, okay, but he told you the thing was dead. You brushed in there for a dead thing. There was, my other buddy was like, yeah, but we didn't know if there were other things there that needed to be rescued. Okay, fine, I get it, but it was completely not what I expected to have happen.
Yeah, and it is interesting because you're talking about this is different than what you were expecting from those players, but also it was a difference in understanding because the reason it was different is they understood that we may need to be going in there guns blazing to save somebody instead of carefully exploring an area.
Right.
And the thing is, we, even as GMs, do not always realize that our players have interpreted something different until they have deeply committed to something.
Oh, yeah. That is, I think, one of the largest issues GMs have to deal with in a game is when you put something out as ABC and your players are like LMNOP. It's like, what? How did you get that? Where did you get that? And like, they will fixate on things. We'll get into that.
Yeah, the only other thing I was going to say is those hiccups are actually the reason we play the game. If we didn't want things to be unexpected, we wouldn't use dice. We use randomizers on purpose so that we have to keep on our toes in our storytelling and in our decision making. So we kind of want things to not always go perfectly smooth.
I've told this story many times before, but I don't know that I've told it recently because it's not as new. I started gaming in 1986. I did not run a game until 2005. And the reason it took that long for me to go from playing to running a game is I didn't think I was capable.
Mm-hmm.
There was this aura of perfection that GMs would project. Like, you didn't see them making mistakes. You didn't see them struggling to deal with things. It felt like everything was going as they expected. They were these master jugglers with all the things doing what they wanted. And like, you didn't notice the chaos that was happening and they're scrambling to try and lay the track in front of you to keep the game going. It took a very long time for me to get to the point where I had the confidence to run. And honestly, it was the confidence to be able to handle the mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
To be able to handle things not going quite the way I thought they would be. To be able to run a game without feeling like I was an absolute expert in the mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, things go awry in sessions all the time.
I went completely in on D&D when I first started really getting into it. So I'm reading Dragon Magazine, the whole shebang. I have not run a session yet at all. I just see this cool looking magazine. I want to read it. And I see people talking about all of these classic adventures. And just to speak to what you're saying about not wanting to make the mistakes, I could not run published adventures because in my head, there is a perfect way to run this and I could not get it from reading it. And I was afraid I was not going to do the one perfect experience that this module is supposed to provide someone.
Absolutely.
And the funny thing is, that's not why people play those. In fact, it's even better when people play through the same epic adventure like that and they can trade stories where they're like, oh, my GM did it this way, or when we did that we were completely stupid and we went through all the way through this trap over here.
One of the reasons I love running one-shots at conventions is to see how different groups of players approach the same problems.
Yeah.
It absolutely delights me when I give them the same characters, I present the same opening and see where they take it. Usually there will be some similarities, but there's always going to be slightly different details. Is any of this unique to D&D or other fantasy games?
Why, no. And my first thought about this was when I was running the One Ring 2nd edition for all of you. We had all sorts of situations where it was like, I thought I knew how this rule worked, and now I have no idea. I am sorry, everyone. I have failed.
Should I mention running a combat for the first time in Coyote and Crow last night?
There's nothing unique to D&D about having lots of mistakes happen or having the unexpected happen that you have to adjust to that isn't necessarily a mistake. It's just, wow, I did not see that coming.
I will say, I do think out of many of the modern games, D&D is one where you can probably run into more mechanical foibles, because there are a fair number of mechanics and the way things work, and it can be a little easier to stumble into you think you're running an ability the correct way, and then you look at it a few weeks later and you're like, oh, we were doing that completely wrong.
As much as I think it causes some disconnect in the story of certain classes, One of the things they said about why they wanted to move subclasses all up to 3rd level in the 2024 rules was to give somebody that is just learning that class just the class to learn.
Yes.
Not anything about the subclass, not sitting here going, wait, I could do this, or I could be this whole other subclass that specializes in this. It's just 2 levels of just learning what this class does at its baseline.
Yep. You know, because as much as narratively, it makes sense for warlocks to have their patron out of the gate, or clerics to have their subclass, or sorcerers to have their origin for their magic. It doesn't help the players that are just getting into the game play those classes and get a feel for how they function at a basic level before getting into the flavor of the subclass.
Yeah. And some other day, we can always talk about trying to reconcile the stories of things that don't kick in until a few levels later. I think we both have some ideas on that, but that is not today.
So what's a time mechanics got bungled in the middle of a game for you?
This one is hard because I know it's happened, but I'm trying to come up with a specific time that it's happened. And the fact that I can't remember one specific time is not that it doesn't happen that often, it's that it happens so often that one does not necessarily jump out at me. I do think that there were times when I was younger, when I was a little less able to roll with the punches, when some of those mechanical foibles did stop the game for a half hour, 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And I am at a point now where it's much more likely for it to maybe stop the game for 10 minutes, depending on how important it is. Maybe just stop the game for 30 seconds because I say, let's not deal with this right now. We'll circle back around.
This was not me running. This was my buddy Scott running the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. We came face to face with a vampire very early on in the dungeon. I think we were only 5th level, maybe 6th level, but only 5th level. And we came face to face with a vampire, and he wasn't running the vampire correctly. Like, he was missing a lot of the things the vampire had, and it was just like, you know, I was doing do I tell him? Do I tell him that what we just did shouldn't have worked? And I finally messaged him and said, hey, you're forgetting about these aspects of the vampire. This should not be going as well as it's going for us. And I think he realized that if he had been running the vampire to the fullest extent it should have been run, it might have been a TPK, because we were definitely outclassed. I don't know what a vampire was doing on that level. But that is the type of thing that can happen when you're running a D&D game or a D&D style game, especially, is the monsters have a lot of fiddly bits.
Yes. I think that was one of the contributing things of how we decided to do this topic, because we were like messaging each other back and forth saying, I forgot that this monster could do this. Well, I forgot this monster could do this.
Yep, I forgot that the Children of Briar were supposed to get 2 attacks. So they were only hitting once, and then forgoing their turn, and they have a really cool entangle ability that I got to use once, but I actually should have used it more often when they were at the top of the structure fighting the technically 4 Children of Briar, because one that had been down on the ground floor ran up there to tell the idiots that were arguing that, hey, they should have just done their entangle thing, because the more of them that are close to each other, the bigger the entangle can be, and that would have been cool. I don't think it would have won them the fight, but it would have been cool. But I do this all the time. I forget some aspect. Damage reduction. I always forget damage reduction.
The Scorched Drakes, even in that fight, I don't think this would have been a major difference, but the Scorched Drakes already have a thing where if you're more than 30 feet away from them, because of the heat mirage coming off of them, you have disadvantage to hit them, which I did remember that. I was happy about that one. But they also have a thing where their blood is superheated. So if you hit them with a melee weapon within 5 feet of them, you're supposed to take additional damage from their blood spattering on you, and I did not remember that at all. I don't know that that would have changed how that fight went, but it is something I just completely forgot with everything else that was going on.
Yeah. How do you handle flubbed mechanics in a game?
I think it depends on how big the blast radius of the mistake is. For example, like I noticed that thing with the blood before the fight ended, and at that point I was like, there's no point to start doing this now.
Yeah.
So at that point, there wasn't really a point in correcting it.
Mm-hmm.
I am of the opinion because, and both of us are softy DMs, maybe someday we should have like a mean, cruel, stern DM that still loves his players on. But, but my feeling is I don't want to do a lot of rewinding unless it's in favor of the players.
Yes. Yeah, I did this with the downtime.
Mm-hmm.
We did the downtime when all the characters were in Zobek, and I did not understand how the way it worked, because there were the rolls with the DC, and then there was a target number, and I'm like, I don't know what this target number is for. I have DC. What's the target number for? They get 3 rolls at DC, against DC 13 or whatever it was, and so we rolled with it. And for the most part, once I found out how it was actually supposed to work, the target number is the number over the DC they need to accumulate from the number of rolls they get. So if they get 3 rolls at DC 15 and their target number is 15, they need to be a total of 15 over the target number on those 3 rolls. So 3 on one, 12 on another, or 3 on one, 5 on another, 8 on another. Whatever it is, they need to be over the DC and reach the target number. For the most part, all of my players actually did that once I went back and reviewed how it worked, but one of them didn't. Turvin's player didn't actually succeed at getting his modified entangle spell. So I basically wrote the group an email explaining, okay, this is how this is supposed to work. And this is, like showing them based on what everyone rolled for their things, how it worked and all that. Because like Grish ended up doing so fantastic that he not only earned 90 gold for dealing with some rats, he also earned 2 healing potions from the locals that were grateful for his efforts. So like, this is what this means. And I explained to them, look, I'm not going to take this away from Turvin because I told you have it. You played with it during the session. But going forward, this is how we're going to run downtime. And Turvin's player actually came back to me and he's like, look, why don't we do this? Why don't we say that I'm still working on it so that the next time we have downtime, I still have to roll to finish it. Let's just say the down thing is like I sort of have the spell worked out. So when I cast it as a memorized spell, it does the thing I want it to do, but I don't have as a free memorization, because that's a thing he and Zortath's player did. They basically modified a spell that means they have access to it as a spell that's always ready to be cast. It doesn't. They still have to use
a domain spell or something like that.
Yeah, it still has to use spell slot, but they don't have to memorize it, so they can spend their spell slots on other spells. So Turvin is just doing the other thing, and basically it's the come up with a compromise. Like Jared said, continue running. Don't bog down the game in it unless it is like completely going to foobar everything because you've just completely killed the mechanics. Just figure out a quick fix, keep running, and then explain to everyone how it's actually supposed to be done in the future and do it that way.
We had a thing during that fight. Strangely enough, Kindness of Angels does not have the radius listed in it in the book that it appeared in where Ivy had it from. There is a version that says that it's supposed to be 20-foot radius. I just let it hit everybody that was generally together because everybody was generally together. When we took our break in the middle of the session, I went and looked it up and saw, okay, it's 20 feet. I feel slightly better about her using the spell now because it's not going to nuke the battlefield, but still 20-foot radius is pretty good.
Yeah.
So that was an example. There was a little bit of confusion about one of the cantrips that went off. I'm just going to handle that with an email. And that's honestly something I was going to say. I didn't necessarily do actually I did do this when we would play face to face, but in the era where I have players that are much more likely to read emails that, we talk in between sessions that way, that is how I like to address rules issues, because I don't like trying to talk through, remember we did this and it did this way and it's actually supposed to be this way. I would rather write in an email, this is what it's supposed to say. This is how I'm interpreting this. I looked it up here and it seems to corroborate what I said. And then have that in writing to hand off to somebody so that it doesn't feel like I am stopping the game to lecture somebody.
In corporate speak, as per my last email. I will say there is, you touched there upon another aspect of fumbled mechanics. And that's when a player is using mechanics wrong. Because it can be very frustrating and potentially detrimental to the relationship between you and the player, depending upon how you address that.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up in the last Tales of the Valiant game, I ended up a little confused because Turvin has the Harvester, which is the scythe that he picked up from the Hollow Man in the last adventure. It has reach, and he was using it in ways that I didn't think quite worked correctly, but I wasn't gonna deal with it then. I was just gonna roll with it because, one, we were running late as it was. Let's just get through this damn thing. But I definitely looked up the clarification on how it's supposed to work, and I'll be better able to explain, yes, you can do that, but your target now has cover because you're fighting with somebody between you and him. Mm-hmm. So you're trying to scythe around another person. So yes, you can still try and hit him, but they're going to have a higher AC because of it.
And one of the things I wanted to bring up is, even though I am a big fan of using this for safety purposes, if you're using something like script change, which has the card for rewind, that is actually a good tool to also say, hey, we got a little tangled up in how the rules are supposed to work. I would like to hold this up, and we're going to go back and start this over again so that things don't get quite so messed up.
Yep.
It doesn't even have to necessarily be a safety thing, but it is, to a certain degree, the comfort of the group so that you all feel confident with how things are unfolding.
I will say, if you do have a player who is misunderstanding or misusing a rule, you do want to have this conversation with them because you don't want them to keep going back to that tactic and then have to have this fight at a later point. You want to deal with it up front, be like, no, this is how this is supposed to work. I'm going to let whatever stand, or we're going to rewind and fix it, whatever. But you do want to have those conversations. Mm-hmm. And don't assume they're trying to cheat.
Don't assume that. It's very easy to misread something. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to remember something from an older edition, the way something worked, and somehow that doesn't, click.
Is that system screen burn?
Yeah, it might be.
Like we did that topic on the Gnomecast or something.
Cross promotion.
But don't never assume malice unless it is in evidence. There's, that's my best thing that I can say about that.
What about when the players fixate on something unimportant, like the critical role chair? Do you want to tell us about the critical role chair?
The short version of the story is Matt described a chair so well and in such detail that they spent a significant portion of time in the session trying to figure out how the chair fit in with the investigation that they were currently doing, because there's no way that chair is that ornate and in this area unless it has something to do with what was going on. And it was so funny because Matt is even trying to hint to them that maybe it's just a really nice chair, and they're thinking that he's doing the sly, like, oh yeah, the GM's trying to tell us not to look at the thing that we're on to him now. And eventually he was just like, it's a chair.
It's a chair, guys. It's just a chair.
I kind of love moments like that. I think the key is making sure that they don't completely derail an entire night's worth of game. It is fine to have that half hour's worth of time to remember for the rest of your lives.
I go back and forth on this one. I call this players making mountains out of molehills. Mm-hmm. The group I play with often will fixate on a thing and then debate it into infinity. Mm-hmm. And it's, as a player, I'm just like, oh God, kill me. This is when I start making things a now problem by casting Fireball or whatever, because it's just like, no, let's just deal with this now. As a GM, I go back and forth. Sometimes the players will fixate on something you didn't expect, and you're like, oh, that's actually pretty cool. Let me beef that up a little bit and make it something interesting for them. And sometimes it's just like, what?
I actually caused this problem when I myself did not believe what I was saying, but I was playing my character to say something stupid. I know if any of you have listened to Heroes of Havel's Way, you cannot picture me playing a stupid character. But
cross promotion.
This was in a 4th edition game. We were trying to investigate this cult that was finding these artifacts that were messing with time. And the GM had done that same thing where he mentioned that there were like candles burning in multiple locations. Like, he was very specific about, and the candles are burning down. It was like, he's done this the last 2 encounters. And we have said this before. Sometimes as a GM, there are things that are your go-to things and you just end up doing them. I playing the paladin. Wow, I played an unintelligent paladin in 4th edition too. This is telling me something about myself.
This is my shocked face.
Yeah, I'm going to make notes for my therapist, but not for right now. Anyway, my character looked at these candles and said, I know what's going on. And everyone else is like, what? Clearly, this is a cover for the Candle Makers Guild. Because everyone that we have come to, and I went through and I explained every time that our GM had, called out candles in his descriptions of things. And the GM is just shaking his head. And he knew that I was just going off on a tangent. But then there were like 2 other players that would not let it go from that point on.
This is not going to be a D&D anecdote. This was happening in my most recent Tales of the Valiant game, but I was so overwhelmed by them charging into the combat, I forgot the specific instances where they were fixating on things where I'm like, no, I did not say that. But years ago, I was running a supers game. They were at a gala at a penthouse in a high-rise, and it was raided by pirates in a flying pirate ship. And I decided on a whim that the second in command to the lead pirate captain running this flying pirate ship attacking rich people in high-rises was a telepathic monkey. Everything went down, the fight, went out. The monkey got away, the captain didn't. They handed him over to police. My players now had a flying pirate ship. I didn't know what to do with that because I was a very young GM, very new. But one of my players suddenly was like, I know what's going on. And I'm like, you do? What's going on? He's like, so we know that this pirate was this special effects guru from Hollywood who was scouting a location, and then he went rogue and made this pirate ship and all this. So what happened, there was an ancient pirate captain whose mind got stuck in the body of a monkey. And for the last 200 years, he's been changing bodies over the centuries until suddenly a person showed up and he took over the special effects guy. And the monkey is actually the special effects guy. And I'm just like, no. What? No. Where did you get that from?
Oh.
None of that was here. But he was so convinced.
That immediately makes me think of the immortal words of Luke Skywalker. Every word of what you just said is wrong. Oh.
I mean, the monkey did end up becoming a recurring villain in the campaign. He ended up sending them to an island infested with zombies with treasure that was essentially like chocolate-covered candy. It was still just like, where did you get that from?
I have had players fixate on something enough that I did change course into the campaign. Not to, again, tangent too far away from D&D, but I had a player in my DC Adventures game that there was some offhand joke about like he was going to like sell out and become like a self-help guru or something like that. I had them eventually travel to an alternate future where they got to see themselves like a few years in the future, and he literally was this guy that was selling self-help books and was like going on this the Tony Robbins tours.
I think it's a balancing act when players do things like that, because it can be just something as small as like fixating on a chair.
Mm-hmm.
If what they're fixating on is actually sparking your imagination and you think is interesting, run with it.
Yeah.
But if it really is just completely out of left field, has nothing to do with anything you've put down on the table before or what you're expecting to put down on the table later, what? No, it's just a chair.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a chair.
And there are those dangerous moments. For example, like when you have, let's say, hypothetically, if you're running a Forgotten Realms game and you had players that you wanted to emphasize that something major was going on, so they spied on, say, Manchun directing members of the Zentarum to do something, and instead of them thinking, I need to stop the plot, they have now gotten it in their heads that I need to kill Manchun. And let's say those players are like 4th level, and Manchun is like 19th level.
Yeah.
These are issues that can go wrong.
Years ago, this is a fantasy game related, but it was a Cortex game. I was in a one-shot at a convention. The whole conceit was the characters were lower mid-level adventurers. They had been sent out to retrieve a thing. They had retrieved the thing in the prologue of the story, and everything picks up with them having come back to the city to hand it to the person that hired them. We're in his lavishly decorated waiting room when a more powerful group of adventurers arrives, and they're like, "Hello, little people. We're going to go in and give him what we got first. You can wait." They go in, and then there's all these horrific sounds. My character is a seer. She projects her vision into the next room and sees that the guy that we're giving this stuff to just slaughtered all of these high-level adventurers and then waved his hand, and all the blood and gore and the bodies were gone, and calls, "Okay, next." At which point, I'm like, "We need to get out of here." And the GM hands me a plot point. And everyone else is like, "What do you mean we need to get out of here? What happened in there?" Like, no, we need to go. We need to go. We need to go. Nobody was listening to me. They believed because they were adventurers, they needed to go into that room and fight this guy.
Mm-hmm.
When the entire adventure was predicated on us running for our lives and trying to find somebody who could help us. The GM and I could not get the other players to leave. So basically they went into that room, confronted the guy, and got slaughtered. And it was a TPK in under 45 minutes.
Oh, goodness.
And like the GM is like literally throwing plot points across the table at me as I'm telling everyone, "We need to go. We need to go. Come on, everyone. We can't do this. We need to run." Nobody else was getting it. Part of it was there was one player who was fixated on, "I am a hero. I am a fighter. This is what I need to do." And another player who knew exactly what he was doing and kept encouraging her.
See, I'm not saying you should be this roundabout, but it does make me think that you could queue up that scene from Rogue One and play Vader walking down the hallway, pause it and say, "Who do you think you are in this scenario?"
This was before Rogue One, but the point is taken. So what about when the players unknowingly go in the complete opposite direction of the material you've prepped for the day?
Players doing something unexpected is part of what makes the game fun. It also depends on exactly what they're doing that is unexpected, because I've been thinking of multiple situations where this happened in multiple campaigns, and sometimes it was great, and sometimes, it was not great.
Yeah.
There's a problem a lot of times when you do, like we were just talking about, when you want to foreshadow something, like, I want you to know this thing is upcoming and it's important. And sometimes it is hard to communicate pacing, because you don't want to say, "Okay, here is the thing, now you have to deal with it all the time." Sometimes you want to build to it. But sometimes when your players see a thing, which kind of dovetails with the fixation thing, this is a problem. It's going to be a problem in the campaign. If the GM showed it to us, we must need to deal with it now.
This is one of those things that we talked a little bit about it before, where you think you've said something and the players hear something else.
Yeah.
Those are times when the players can just start going in a direction you may not have material ready for.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically a dance of, okay, are they doing this because they actually think they have information that needs them to go that way? Are they being obnoxious and just going that way because they know I want them to go the other way? I've had my players do that. I've yelled at them for that before. There was in the original Eberron campaign I was running, they were in the jungles of Arganessen, and just for narrative shits and giggles, I was saying, "Oh, the path ahead is flooded. Your guide says you need to go this way." They argued with me for 45 minutes. And finally, one of the players like, "Oh, I think there's an invisible wall here. We need to go that way." And I'm like, "Screw you, buddy." I literally could have just said, "Fine, you sludge your way through the flooded swamps and end up at the encounter I wanted to give you anyway." But I was just trying to add some narrative flavor to the journey.
Yeah.
And they were arguing with me about it.
I mean, this goes back to when we've talked about the Quantum Ogre and, the plot point being in the exact location that they go to no matter what they do. And to an extent, you don't want the plot not to advance, but you also want their decisions to have some kind of meaning. What I try and keep in mind is if they go off track, let them go off track a little bit. Not 3 or 4 game sessions, but like they're going off track. Let them realize, oh, we went completely off track, and maybe do something like, oh, you get ambushed by these things. Not something that's going to murder them, just something that's going to remind them, wow, we did get off track. These things ambushed us. We better go back the other direction now.
There's a style of game mastering, a style of campaign called sandbox.
Mm-hmm.
I am not a big fan of sandbox.
Listener, neither of your hosts are good at sandbox play.
I've done it a little bit. Like I did it when I ran Savage Worlds East Texas University.
Mm-hmm.
But that was a small sandbox that was a contained location where they were all college students dealing with Scooby-Doo, Buffy the Vampire Slayer style mysteries on a college campus in the surrounding town.
Yeah.
There was only so far they could go.
Yeah.
What I generally don't like about D&D style sandboxes is the GM generally has the world set up with things in motion already. And if the players don't do the thing they want them to do, they will eventually be punished because that evil, big, bad, evil guy fulfilled his plan and did things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that. Like, I understand people being resistant to the quantum ogre and feeling like if you give me a left and a right path, my decision should make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And it should, but there's also sometimes like what I was trying to do, which was just narrative flavoring.
Yes.
It was a little bit of sugar on top of the dessert of the game I was presenting them. And they took it as the main course. No, this is not a left or right thing. This is me saying, you guys go this way because of this reason. It fits the narrative flair of the game. It fills in the story of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But they were like, no. We wanted to go that way. Why are you preventing us from going that way? What evil things do you have for us down this path? And it's just like, I have an interesting encounter, okay?
The funny thing is, too, like, I have been hesitant to try and discuss sandboxes much because I am not good at just letting PCs go wherever, because if they don't have inertia, sometimes players don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to balance that with still letting it be a sandbox. But I have heard a lot of people mention that, especially a lot of the earlier 5e adventures, which I am currently running Curse of Strahd, and I've heard people mention it that way, that it is a sandbox, and it is sort of, but there are all of these things that need to happen, and they can choose whatever order they want to have them happen in.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these things they don't know need to happen until they go to a certain place. And that feels different to me than just a sandbox where everything has equal weight wherever they go.
Yeah, I think it's just, you want to give your players choices, you want to respect their agency, but they also need to respect your time and effort
Mm-hmm.
into what you've put into the game. I have reached the point in GMing, because it's been 20 years now. I think I can say I've been GMing longer than I was playing before I was GMing. Which just means I'm so old, Jared. I'm so old. You can say, okay, that's great if you want to go down that way instead of the way the quest, in the direction the quest giver asked you to go, or the information you've been given asked you to go. But that means we're done for today.
Yeah.
Because I don't have anything prepped for that direction. And I'm not going to burn myself out tonight trying to make it up as we run through things. Now, this is me saying this as somebody who absolutely tailors their games to the players. I very much come up with the conceit for the campaign, but I don't start filling in details until I know who my characters are.
Mm-hmm.
Who the player characters are, what's going to be important to them, and then I start tailoring all the intricate flavor and details around who those characters are.
Don't tell anybody else in the game, but I may not have had these particular 3 missions planned before you all made your characters in the Marodi campaign.
How many years ago was that now? I mean, technically, you didn't even know if we were going to get past, like, what do we start? We started at 3rd level. You probably didn't even know if we were going to get past 6th level, because you did a check-in at 6th level.
Yeah.
So,
and now we're on the roller coaster now.
yeah. If we don't end up fighting a certain red dragon at some point, I'm going to be very disappointed. I also expect us to at least have a conversation with Kazina's grandfather at some point. So.
I have things that I have going on. That is actually, here's our pin for another episode, but GM planning for the future, like taking notes, saying like, okay, this is a thing that needs to come back that you didn't necessarily plan before the session, but from this session on, you know, this has to come back.
Yeah.
That sort of like long-term planning and how you record it and keep track of it.
Definitely a good concept for an episode. Are there good surprises when the players do the unexpected?
I think sometimes you have to relax and let something roll, and it can turn into a good thing. And my example will be this. I have a tendency to make artifacts that are absolutes. So in other words, I don't go through all of the issues where it's like, oh, it can cast a 9th level spell this many times per day and it can do this. I made a dagger in a campaign, and the whole thing was, if you stab someone with this dagger, they will die, and the dagger disappears and goes somewhere else in the multiverse. And I'm thinking, I am okay with whatever they want to kill with this. Like, if they want to use this as their get out of jail free card because they took on a dragon at the wrong level, that's what they get to do with this artifact. They have it now. They were negotiating with a Shadowvar diplomat. Granted, obviously an evil person, but a person that was visiting their country, their city where they were from, under a flag of truce, basically just to say, hey, you know, we may take you over, but for now we can have, we can chill out and not get into open hostilities. And one of my players takes out the dagger, stabs the ambassador in the throat.
Oh my.
Again, it's not that they didn't know that the Shadowvar in the setting are very bad people. It is the fact that, that particular diplomat in that moment was not immediately causing harm. And also, when you have a floating city full of wizards that could be a problem for any given country, and you kill their diplomat, that helps them decide which country to be a problem for.
It's gonna be consequences and repercussions.
Yeah.
And this did, I didn't have it happen right away because I didn't have it planned for, because I was just, again, like I was saying, I was foreshadowing them being campaign villains. And this is what happened. So what I did at that point was, the next short arc that I have planned is going to go the way it goes. And then we are going to start playing a war campaign. There are going to start be skirmishers that are attacking the edges. This thing is going to culminate in this big fight with what are the Dusk Walkers, the big undead things that could shatter magic items. Everything shadow and darkness related in this army, but I was going to give them a few adventures in between to let them know this is coming. There is a war that has started now because of this. But it was actually really good for the campaign. It made for a great story because it wasn't just that the villains showed up and decided to be bad. They were already kind of bad, and they pushed them into facing them.
Yeah.
So I would say in the end that was good, but for that brief second when he said, I pull out the dagger and stab him in the throat, I was thinking, that's not how this night was going to go.
I'm going to say on this note is that your players should always be surprising you.
Mm-hmm.
You may know in general how your players are going to do things, but it's those moments where they kind of step up and do something spectacularly different that can just kind of become written in stone for your group.
Mm-hmm.
That Eberron campaign I was talking about, where they argued with me about going through the jungle swamp. The whole, the encounter that they ran into was a cult to a black dragon, and they were in the midst of about to sacrifice some dragonborn residents of Arganessen. And of course, my players, big damn heroes, got involved, stopped it, killed the priestess of the cult, which meant they took away the dragon's toy. So as they left, the dragon pursued them, and they ended up having a head-on fight with the dragon in the next session, where it chased them. They were out of the jungle on the plains. The dragon comes in and starts attacking them. The cavalier, who had 3 hit points left, challenged the dragon, which meant the dragon had to focus on him and could not attack anyone else for I think the next round or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
that was not something I ever expected that player to do. That player was the type that was always making sure they could heal themselves. They had enough healing potions for themselves. They were never the one to make the sacrifice play.
Yeah.
You know? And it was like when they did that, it was like, oh my God. And then they proceeded to roll a crit on the dragon. They didn't take the dragon out. They still ended up getting knocked down to 0 hit points in the next round. But still, it was like, that was big and surprising and like, yes, please give me more of this.
I had a very stupid thing that worked one time in an AD&D game when I was a player. We had people wounded and trying to get healed. We were fighting a blue dragon up on the parapets of a castle. The cleric is over there standing over the dying fighter trying to get them up and running again. I believe the rogue was just dead. And my wizard is standing here in front of a blue dragon. I asked the GM, I was like, how hard would it have been for me to have cast a spell on my spell book while all this was going on? And he was like, I think they were distracted enough that they wouldn't have noticed that because the dragon was monologuing. It's like, okay, I'm going to walk up to the dragon and say, in honor of you, because you are a great and mighty dragon, and I know that you are the masters of spell casting and all things arcane, I would like to offer you this new spell that I have written. Present the spell book to him. Dragon reads the spell book. I cast a spell that I have never thought was ever going to be useful, which is Sepia Snake Sigil. If you ever remember that one, it is a symbol that you put on something, and if somebody touches the thing you put it on, it jumps out and paralyzes you. Never had any idea where this would work before, but the dragon looked at the book, rolls a 2 on its save. I said, how hard is it for me to push this dragon off the parapet while it's paralyzed? So I'm over here as the cleric is healing the fighter, pushing the dragon off the parapet, and it just goes off the edge of the castle, hits the ground, still paralyzed.
God.
Yeah, I don't think I will ever, as a player, have something that out of it happen and work ever again.
You gotta love it. You gotta love it. That's why we play. So to wrap things up, how concerned should we be about these issues in our sessions?
You should panic and run in circles screaming.
No, don't do that. Don't do that thing. This is all as expected. This is all functioning as normal. This is what role-playing games are. Yes, there's varying levels of these mistakes and problems and unexpected surprises, but this is all what it is.
I would advocate that if you're using safety tools at the table, get used to the idea that it doesn't have to be that someone is deeply emotionally harmed. If it just gets to the point to where you're getting overwhelmed, use your safety tools. It's not that anybody's doing anything bad. It's just, there's too much going on, guys. You went in 5 different directions. I need us to pause for a minute.
Yeah, even before the days of safety tools, this was the, okay, GM, call for a bathroom break.
Yeah.
Call for a snack break. Take a moment, take a breather, figure out what you need to do next, figure out your game plan. It's okay to do these things. We are human beings. We are mostly doing this with our friends. If you're doing this for pay, I mean, you have a slightly higher standard, but we're still all human beings.
I also think it's important to try and assess how important a mistake really is, how important a thing that went off the rails really messes with things, because there are times in the moment it feels very momentous, and when you are not running the game, you realize that's not that big a deal.
Yep. And honestly, these are how we learn.
Mm-hmm.
These are learning experiences. You do something in a game session and it does not go as expected, and you have some time to think about it. You know, maybe it was player not understanding what you were trying to put down, so you learn how to say things a little more clearer. Maybe you left too much wiggle room to get the players where you needed them to be. So the next time you run something like that, you get them closer to the starting point you wanted them at to begin with. These are all things that you learn from and grow from.
I think a lot of things that are unexpected end up being the best things that happen in your campaign. Maybe I was wrong when I said that people should run around in circles and panic and scream.
You can do it if you're pretending to be a child of Briar and pitching your voice up really high and gravelly and dropping F-bombs.
Now let's join Ange and Jared for some downtime research. where they do the work so we don't have to.
Every episode, we're going to look for something related to D&D that we want to pass along to the listeners. It might be products, websites, videos, or podcasts, but it will always be something that we think will enhance your D&D experience. However, before we do that, we are going to do our Eldritch Invocation. We have a Patreon now, so if you would like to help us do the show and provide some additional content for you, we would love it if you decided to join. We've got our own Discord, and we've been releasing supplementary material based on our actual play, Heroes of Havel's Way, as well as other game material and ephemeral that we think you would absolutely love. So please check us out at patreon.com/THAC0WA.
So for me this week, Solasta 2 is coming. In the early days of the show, Jared and I were both playing a lot of Solasta, and we talked about it a fair amount. It is a great 5e video game. It kind of fell into the shadows with the behemoth that is Baldur's Gate 3. But Solasta is a very fun video game, and Solasta 2 is coming soon. They have not given a release date yet. There is a demo available on Steam right now. Looks like they've done some really cool improvements to the graphics, lots of other little improvements, and just very cool looking stuff. So I am excited for this for whenever it's going to come out. And I figured I would mention that you might want to be on the lookout for it. I do kind of expect it to happen this year.
Yeah, probably. And I would also say, I absolutely love Baldur's Gate 3, but if you actually want a game that is going to remind you of exactly how the rules are supposed to work, Solasta is really good at that.
Yeah.
My thing is not so much a thing that I want you to buy. It is something I want you to be aware of, because this was pretty shocking. We had heard that originally I was just going to mention that Chris Perkins has announced that he is retiring from D&D. And I thought, oh, that's important. We should mention that. Then the same day that I was writing this, we got word that Jeremy Crawford is also retiring. If you don't follow D&D, you may not realize that these two are probably the two biggest names associated with the current era of Dungeons and Dragons as far as design work goes. The way it kind of developed at this point is Jeremy was kind of the person that was the top dog with rules, and Chris Perkins was kind of the top person for adventures and setting and story material. So they're both retiring. I think you could argue that Perkins has probably had more influence on D&D than any other single designer. He has been there for 28 years. He has literally worked on the game twice as long as Gygax did. And it's just amazing. He went from AD&D's second edition, the tail end of that, all the way up through the 2024 edition of the rules. That's just wild. Jeremy Crawford has only been there for 18 years.
Only.
Yeah. So he started in the 3.5 era and has been there all the way through the 2024 rules coming out. So there have been some rumblings that Chris Perkins might have been thinking about retiring, after the 50th anniversary and the 2024 rules. I think Crawford is a little bit more of a surprise to people. We're going to have a link to the Aeon World article talking about it in the show notes, but I just thought that was an interesting thing to bring up, because this is seriously the end of an era for D&D. And I'm not saying this to be, doom and gloom or this is terrible, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying this is momentous, though.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of Sturm and Drang about the two of them leaving D&D. Oh, no, D&D is dying. Hasbro's losing it. Wizards of the Coast, what are you doing? No one is going to come and take your books away. No one is going to come make you stop playing D&D how you want to play D&D. There are people out there even today who are still playing first edition D&D, and nobody has taken their books away from them because it's not the current game. It's like, yes, this is very momentous, but D&D is probably not going to go anywhere. Even if D&D as a game, they stop producing it suddenly because these two disappeared, that's not going to happen. The games we have, we still have.
Yeah. Honestly, when Chris Perkins started 28 years ago, he didn't start as a person running the entirety of D&D story and adventure content. We have seen people like Bill Slavacek, who was in charge of everything D&D, and then he was gone. So we might just see emergent people that have been working on products moving up and getting to make their mark more dramatically on the game. And that could be a really interesting thing to see.
I mean, honestly, when Perkins started was probably the closest point in time to D&D just disappearing forever.
Yeah.
Because there was a point in time in the 90s when D&D could have just disappeared.
Yeah, he started at a very tumultuous time, or at least right before a very tumultuous time for TSR, and then managed to ride out the storm as it got purchased by Wizards of the Coast and everything else that's happened.
It was very much a maybe about whether Peter Atkins was going to purchase D&D when TSR was going under. He could have said meh and walked away, and D&D probably would have disappeared.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a very in-depth story that is actually very interesting, and I don't even know the best place to point you at, but it was a really weird 3-point, like one company was going to buy them, and then that looked like it was going to fall through, and then Wizards, it was really interesting and very dramatic, and yeah, it kind of felt like maybe D&D is just going to fall off a cliff.
Yeah, and maybe somebody else would have revived it years later, maybe not. The game isn't going anywhere. You still have your books. You still get to play how you want to play. Don't panic.
And also be happy for both of them, because they get to retire, and
yeah.
And as Chris Perkins says, he gets to actually enjoy playing D&D and not worrying about the future of it and the direction of it.
Oh, yeah. And these guys are not old enough that they're just going to go sit on a porch and drink margaritas or something. I mean, maybe they will for a little while because you can, but we're probably going to see them in other stuff, or they're just going to be enjoying playing.
Mm-hmm.
We are happily part of the Polygamers Podcast Network, helping you run and play your best games. We think you'll enjoy another Polygamers podcast like
The Heroes of Havel's Way. The Heroes of Havel's Way is an epic fantasy story about two young heroes, Odie and Aramon. These heroes have the potential to deal with a dire threat from an ancient time that is poised to return to their world. A Titan destroyer, Valhall Morris the Mountain Strangler, stirs. The fate of the barony of Castican may be in their hands. We play the game to find out. We invite you to join us on our journeys. That sounds like a really neat AP.
We have used up all of our resources, so we think it's time for a long rest. I hope this adventure was rewarding for you, and we hope you'll go exploring with us when we start our next adventure.